So for me, the definition of a learning mindset is taking that same growth mindset, but adding in sharing onto that.
Welcome to a new episode of the Stay Hungry podcast, which delves into human-centric learning and explores how to build and sustain a learning organization with a growth mindset as its foundation. In today's episode, we'll explore how mindset, habits, and a knowledge-sharing culture can bring meaningful organizational change and innovation. Joining us today is Toby Newman, a seasoned L&D professional with over 20 years of experience in designing and delivering high-impact learning programs. Toby is also a TEDx speaker who has spent his career fostering a culture of continuous learning and innovation through a learning mindset. From working with global teams to designing strategies that align with learning and business goals, Toby's insights are invaluable for leaders to stay ahead of the curve in a rapid changing world. Let's kickstart this episode right away with Toby. Toby, welcome to the Stay Hungry podcast. I was really fascinated by your experience in L&D, and today I want to kick off the episode by asking you about your background and how you got into learning and development. Take it away, Toby.
Thank you very much. Well, it's an honor to be here. So thank you for inviting me. If I think about when I started, I suppose it's the same as pretty much most people of my generation of L&D, is you fell into it. I was, to show my age, I was Blockbusters. And my manager at the time said, hey, go train those people. And I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. I'm not sure what to do, but okay. And I was like, oh, I like this. This is good. And then, that was 25 years ago plus. And I've done call center training. I've done call center management training, instructional designing. And I think for the last, 10 years or so, if not a bit more, I think my focus has been on learning tech, and implementing and getting the right tech involved, or the learning ecosystem, I suppose, best way of putting it. And then really kind of honing down on how do you realistically get people to develop themselves. So I know we're going to talk about mindset, and that's kind of a big thing for me in terms of how does the individual understand the importance for them to be able to develop. We've also included a lot of development training of leaders in my time. I've done a bit of sales, but not too much. My focus has mainly been around leadership developments, but pretty much as an individual. How do you develop yourself? How do you get the best out of yourself? And how do you create the best environment, whether it be a learning environment or maybe let's call it a general well-being environment. So it's kind of where I am at the moment.
Interesting. Thank you for sharing, Toby. And that really transitions nicely into our topic for today. And I want to start by asking, why do you believe that the right mindset is the starting point for meaningful organizational change? And how does that potentially impact an organization?
Oh, well, I think first of all, I think it's to define what I mean by a mindset, and in particular, a learning mindset. So I think most people would know the term growth mindset. And within growth mindset, you've got development, curiosity, positivity, and self-awareness. So they're the kind of the four main things. But the trouble with that, mindset is it's very insular. It's all about me. It's all about my curiosity and how I'm doing and how aware I am, which is great for an individual. But for a company, you end up causing silos and just it all breaks down. So for me, the definition of a learning mindset is taking that same growth mindset, but adding in sharing onto that. Now, when I talk about sharing, I don't just mean, that's, hey, I've learned all these things and let me share them with somebody. It needs to become something that is just fundamentally inside of you that you want to be able to share whatever you're doing, how you're doing it. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're on TikTok or Instagram sharing every time you eat something. But in reality, that is actually the kind of mindset you want. You want somebody you want to create a mindset that you think, not only am I developing, but I want people to come along with the journey. If I speak to, say, my leaders and I talk to them about, sharing, they'll say, yeah, I maybe share within my team, or I develop a lot. But when you ask them, when was the last time you spoke to your colleagues, your other leaders, and said to them, this is the way that you did this ran this report, or that you had this interesting conversation and you just wanted to share it? Unfortunately, not everybody is like that. And unfortunately, that is a gap or a holding back in order for us to be able to be a learning culture. And a lot of companies talk about a great culture, but to me, if you want to have a great culture, you need to have not just a growth mindset, but a learning mindset, and have a sharing intrinsically part of that development.
But isn't every organization to some degree already sharing information and a learning organization in this way?
It's a good point. And I suppose it depends what you define as sharing. Now, every company will say we share, because they'll say we share our strategy, we share our values, we share our success stories. Now, my challenge back to those people is, and I use my previous company as a good example, that we used to do a lot of best practice sharing. It was great. You would have teams saying, hey, we had this great deal closing in this part of the country, and this is a great partnership we're having with that. And for them, that is sharing and great. Move on, great. Now, the trouble is that 99% of everybody that's watching that will go, okay, fine, whatever. They won't think, oh, that's interesting. How do I do that? They may think, I'll try and replicate that in my area. And usually it fails, because one area of success does not replicate the same thing in the same area for a different problem. So if you're having a success with this company in Asia, the same thing won't work in North America, for argument's sake. So what we try to do is to break down that best practice into its bite-sized chunks. So what we would do is we would gather the leaders together and get one of them to share a best practice. And then the other ones, we challenge them to say, now take that idea of what that success was and replicate it in your area as best as you can. So take the bits that you think will work and try them and see if they do work. And that, for me, is what we call about best practice sharing and effective sharing. It's not just me sharing with you, just like we say, communication is not one way, it is two way. So effective sharing is me sharing it. Yes, that's a good start. But also the recipient going, I should be able to do something with that. Maybe I can try this, maybe I can try that, and work with it, and as an effective process. So it is a two-way process.
Where would you say lays the business value for creating this type of loop inside an organization?
I mean, just like with any L&D stuff, it's very hard to put your finger on it to say it's going to raise your P&L by this or whatever, the numbers, KPIs you're looking at. I think the biggest area that you're going to find an impact is breaking down silos and efficiency. A lot of people would know lean and agile and those kind of things, that removing waste. That by having an effective sharing mindset and a sharing program, what you're doing is eliminating duplicates. You're allowing individuals to connect better with teams that they didn't think that they could. you would have a better understanding of the company. So you get this engagement that companies will see their employees much more willing to share, because if they see, oh, I shared this once and somebody came back going, oh, that's great, but what did you think about this? And did you think about that? That person go, oh, okay, somebody's actually paid attention to me and they've heard my thoughts. So now I can go over the top of that and go, oh, that's a good point. Okay, I'll try and do that bit next time. And just like scientists do with peer sharing, that you take one idea and then once you kind of ideate it out and go back and forth, it eventually becomes a theory, or it becomes, kind of known science. So we should be doing the same thing within companies to order to really cement that engagement piece.
So when leaders inside organizations are trying to get this new habit into play, what are they looking for in their employees and in the workforce to make this happen? What's the mindset that they're looking for?
I mean, that's the $1 million question is how do you create a mindset? Now we could spend, kind of hours breaking out, all the different aspects of like, how do you create curiosity? How do you create self-development and self-awareness and all those things? So just to give you a couple of little examples of little things you can do. And the whole idea is that you start small and you build up good habits. So for example, when you talk about sharing, the idea would be that in every team meeting, irrespective, every single team meeting you have, first 5 minutes, not the last, because nobody cares about the last 5 minutes. First 5 minutes, you have a sharing platform. You have a sharing time to say, what do you want to share? Now, it's going to be difficult at the start. You'll get kind of crickets along going, no, don't hear anything. Nobody wants to share anything. And bear in mind, this could be maybe you went to the cinema, or you read this book, or you listened to this podcast, or whatever. It doesn't have to be, very specific. But if you create that environment where you deem it as important, you then articulate to the team and say, this is something that's going to happen every week or every month or whatever it is. And this is something we're going to continue to do. You will find, I've done this many times, you will find that you'll get to a point where you have to stop people sharing, because it gets so much that people just want to share and share and share and share. And that's a great challenge to have, because then you have to start thinking, how do we control, in inverted commas, this sharing mentality? So you need to create an environment that people want to share. Second thing you need to do is create a psychologically safe environment. I'm a big proponent of psychological safety. And one of the very simple ways, it's a big, big topic, but very simply when it comes to sharing, is what they call rewarded vulnerability. Very simply, it is when somebody shares something, they are being extremely vulnerable because they're sharing something that is important to them, and they hope other people will appreciate that. So one of the tips you can do as a leader and within your team is to reward that vulnerability, not by standing up and applauding or by giving them a pay rise or anything, but verbally or by, just within a group kind of appreciating that somebody has given that opinion, not telling you, think positively. So don't think, oh no, that's a bad idea, we're never going to do that. Or think, okay, that's an interesting idea. We'll have to, how could we do that? What would it look like? Maybe we have to look at that next year or whatever it is, but think positively about it and challenge in a positive way. So it'd be things like, rather than, oh, I don't know, that's not sure. Or maybe somebody shared that they're into Dungeons and Dragons or something, and you're like, I've got no idea what that is. You can still be positive to say, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'm sure there's other people that like it, or I'm just not into that, but that's great. Thank you for sharing. The other thing around vulnerability is, as a leader, I always say you cannot expect others to be vulnerable unless you are vulnerable first. So you really need, as a leader, to start sharing yourself. Be more open about your hobbies and what you like to do, but also sharing ideas that you've had, not to say this is the way we're going to do it, but to share, to say, hey, I've been thinking about this. What do we think? And then in inverted commas, rewarding those people that kind of come forward and go, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then challenge them, like kind of ask them to say, is there something that you would not do as part of this share? And then you're hopefully going to get, again, it's going to take time. You get people that are more likely to share, and then they'll do it more often. So the quality and the quantity goes up. Now, in terms of the self-awareness piece, I mean, again, curiosity is a really hard one. But for me, for the self-awareness piece, again, it comes back to that vulnerability. As a leader, they really need to be vulnerable in sharing how they see things and how little or much they are aware of things. So they need to be asking themselves questions, things like, I mean, you can do simple self-awareness exercises like, when was the last time I showed gratitude to somebody? And you can think to yourself, oh, not sure. When was the last time that you were annoyed at somebody? When was the last time you were happy with somebody? And what did that look like? So looking at your actions, that then within your actions, then you've got your behaviors that make those. And then the emotions are the kind of, the real deep, that's kind of emotional intelligence. But journaling is a really powerful tool that helps you to analyze what you're doing. And it could just be a simple case of when you're, running, or when you're in the shower, or when you're commuting or driving, it's just think to yourself, what did I do yesterday? How did I act? How did I behave? That conversation I had with Jim last week, how do I think it went? You could do it with your partner, with your spouse, or with your girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever it is, to say that that argument or that conversation I had, how did I react? Why did I react the way I did? You're almost kind of doing yourself a mini counseling session, but that's the only really way that you can start to understand yourself, not necessarily start to control yourself, but adapt your behaviors. And that will then allow you to become a better leader, a better partner, both professionally and personally. And it will mean that ultimately your team is going to be more open to sharing and being themselves and all those kind of fun things as well. So that was a lot.
So it sounds that self-awareness is really important here for growing and learning, but also as a collective.
It's the foundational piece, absolutely.
The importance of sharing and actually daring to share. But that can be a little bit scary as well, right? Sharing your success or your failures or your progress in front of hundreds of people in your organization. The imposter syndrome is a real thing.
Oh, tell me, how
to handle that?
Oh, I mean, imposter syndrome. I'm probably one of the biggest, proponents of imposter. I suffer from it massively, and I think the only. I don't want to belittle it because it is an important thing, and it's something that I feel that you can never really get over. It is just something, maybe like with other, not diseases, but other things that that's just who you are. I think when it comes to, we talked about kind of cultures and stuff at the start, that as a CEO, as a leader of a company or a leader of division, it is their responsibility to set the bar. And you talk about kind of, leaders living the behaviors and living the values. This is something that leaders can do to encourage everybody else to do it. I mean, I've seen both. I've seen leaders that are incredibly vulnerable and will, in front of everybody, say, maybe not say they made a mistake, but they'll say, this is what I thought was good at the time. I'm being honest and saying it didn't work. And we're going to try something different. And I've seen the opposite. And I've seen, leaders that will maybe talk around speak up cultures, or that everybody should be responsible, but be accountable for their own behaviors. but then in their actions, you don't see the same. So I've seen it on both sides. And I think the only thing I would say is that you cannot force, just like the saying goes, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't force it to drink. Within a culture, the only thing you can do is be individually responsible. And I've had conversations with previous people about, where does culture start? Is it starts from the top and goes down, or does it start from the bottom? For me, it starts at the bottom. It starts with individuals, any individual needing to think about, how do you become more self-aware? How can you practice vulnerability in a safe way so that you don't get sacked for saying, I don't know, or I'm overloaded, or I'm stressed? Because there are some environments, if you say that, you get sacked. So you need to kind of understand the environment you're in. But if everybody is doing that at all levels, you naturally start to create a culture where it is okay to be vulnerable, and it is okay, expected to be shared. If anything, you get to the point where if you don't share, you're then the outlier. You're the one that is not necessarily going to get promoted. So yeah, it's a difficult thing, but in terms of, if somebody thinks, oh, I've got imposter syndrome and I'm always checking, but that is fine. That is part of being self-aware. Like I said, I have a big problem with imposter syndrome, but I am okay with it. For one, you have to accept it. And for two, I use it. I talk about having imposter syndrome with my teams. And previously when I was a leader myself, I would talk about the fact that I suffer from imposter syndrome, and I always need to check to see if this is the right thing we're doing, and all that kind of stuff. And people, sometimes they have respect for you, sometimes they lose respect, but you can only be yourself.
So if you're accelerating this and people start sharing knowledge, information, and progress inside of their organizations, what do you do with all this shared expertise that people are bringing to the table? I mean,
yeah, because then you get the knowledge management issue of where is all this information going, and if you're sharing all this knowledge and that person leaves, and what do you do? I think at the moment technology is catching up with us slightly when it comes to knowledge management. Yes, there are traditional knowledge management platforms that you can put information on. I think where this can all go is the use of AI and ChatGPT and Copilot and all those kind of tools. Is, for example, if you're in a meeting and it is being tracked by AI, then that information that you're sharing is being captured. And then ideally you would have a system behind it that will, or at least the AI system will be able to make sure that information is not lost, or it's kind of categorized in the right way. So I can see that there is barriers to it. But if I'm being honest, I would rather have those challenges than the where we are at the moment, where we're not sharing at all. It's a kind of like, wouldn't it be lovely if we were an abundance of sharing and development, and then we have to worry about where all that knowledge goes? I'm thinking that's the next stage. I'm just worrying about, can we get people to share in the first place?
So except for the imposter syndrome that you were mentioning previously, are there any other hurdles along the way that you have seen in the organizations that you've been working with when it comes to sharing and information and knowledge like that? Any typical patterns that you see?
I think that the biggest barrier is being tech, in terms of, I think people would think that if they need to share, then they need another tech platform, or they need, I've got information over here and information over here, and you got this platform is storing some intellectual property, and this platform over here that's storing a different kind of property. And that's the biggest problem, I think, at the moment, is that it's all over the place. And I think I mentioned at the start, the kind of having a learning ecosystem is so important. I think you talk to a lot of companies and they say, and you ask them, what does your learning ecosystem look like? They'd probably struggle, or they would give you the most basic stuff and assume that's where people store the information because that's their formal knowledge. But I think what companies need to do is to really think about and ask the people that are doing the job, where do you store your information at the moment? How do you access that information? And then build up from there. Again, it could well be that you use a knowledge platform, but I think it's an understanding of where is my knowledge at the moment, and then figuring out how to access and use the platforms that you've got at the moment rather than trying to fix it with another new platform.
I've also been working in different organizations through my career, and I do believe that most companies, they do this to some degree already. We mentioned that previously as well.
Yeah.
But my question for you is, how can organizations understand what they currently are at, and if they need to improve their knowledge sharing within the organizations?
I think that it comes down to how their strategy is. And I think, so for example, you'll get companies that will say, we want to be one company. Maybe they've got different divisions doing different things, or different regions doing different things. And if they say, we want to be one company, come with one face, then you need to figure out, where is everybody sharing at the moment, and how do we bring it into one platform? But if you've got companies that will say, our priority or our strategy is to be the best in each individual country and region, and allow the regions to be their own kind of their own culture. So we're not going to dictate to say this is our company, but more to say, hey, as Europe, as APAC, as America, as South America, whatever it is, we want you to bring your own flavor, and we will give you guidance as a corporate structure and templates, but we want you to go your own way. Now, if you're in L&D, you need to understand, you should be able to understand, which way is my company going? What is the strategy that we're aiming for, so that I can create an environment that allows that strategy to grow? And I think, so that's kind of one way that the L&D can do it. I think that the one thing that I've found when it comes to sharing and how to improve it is simply by the strategy. Now, if you ask any CEO and you ask them, what's your strategy for X, they'll know it. That's their job. That's fine. If you ask their team, like the senior leadership team, what's the strategy, 99.9% they'll know it, or they'll have a pretty good understanding of it. Now, the trouble is that if you ask any individual working for almost any company, you ask them not just what is our strategy, but what does it mean for you? They'll go, well, I think I know maybe the values, I've heard of them. Maybe they'll know, like, there's an acronym that they'll use and they'll know that acronym. But so they'll maybe know the high level, but unfortunately it's rare that people will know or feel that they know what the strategy means for them. In other words, how do I impact that strategy? And the reason why it's important for sharing is that as a leader, you can take, or you should be able to take, your manager's strategy and the numbers and KPIs and goals and stuff that relate to that, and translate that down to what it means for your team and your individuals, so that they can understand how that is. Now, it's called different things. I've heard it called a VISM, which is like vision, strategy, measurement, and execution, I think. And then you've got strategic deployment matrix and all these different tools. But the key is not just having the tool, but that mentality to share. In other words, I have got this strategy. I need to share it with my team. In other words, I need to give it to them, but I also need to receive the input to say, what does this mean for you? How do you infer this? How does this translate to you? So that they understand it, so then it can go, next level, down to all the way down to the shop floor people that are dealing with customers directly and all that kind of stuff. So that would be one example where sharing is something that leaders need to do as part of their learning ecosystem.
And that's super interesting. And today's business landscape is obviously changing in a rapid pace. Technology is advancing. What do you believe are the consequences for organizations to fail to prioritize this and actually share this knowledge internally? What's the cost of failure, you believe?
I think you can look at it at multiple levels. I think as a learning and development, if we look at it from that perspective, the cost of failing is that everybody just ends up either not developing or developing in their own way. Because if we are not consciously working on how do we share effectively, then people again won't do it, or they'll go off in their own direction. And that basically then means that we're out of a job, because then we're doing an ineffective job. There are obvious financial benefits to sharing, because like I said, if you're being more effective, if you're reducing waste from a lean perspective, then you're going to make more money, or at least you're going to save money. I think in terms of, if you look bigger picture, it's like AI and all that kind of stuff, that one of the biggest reasons or the benefits of being human is that we have like all our own experiences all locked up in here. And AI is amazing. I use it constantly, and it comes up with great ideas, but it is, at least not yet, it is not as good as we are in terms of our own knowledge. So if we do not practice sharing and sharing effectively and having discourse, I think discourse for me has been lost in the last 5-10 years through TikTok and Twitter and all that kind of stuff. We've just lost the ability to have a conversation about something. So it's not just the ability to share, but the ability to question and to have a discourse about that thing you're sharing, and about moving on with a better idea. And I think if we lose that, we lose that ability to share in the basics, that you can't have that discourse, then you are going to end up with a lot of automation. You are going to end up with companies going, well, we'll just use AI for everything, because we don't see the benefit of having people, because they're all just going to sit there and do their job and not share and not have that discourse and that innovation, which leads from sharing. So you could potentially talk about like an existential crisis. Maybe that's a bit too far, but it's that drip. It's a stepping stone all the way up to something much, much bigger.
Yeah, that's a really interesting conversation, I think. It's the aspects of collaboration. It's the aspect of being creative. Yeah. It's the aspects of iterate and sort of learn from your failures, right? And then
all those things, innovation and curiosity, they all stem from just sharing.
And also, since everything is changing rapidly, and I mean, your competitors out there are changing. They're, want a bigger piece of the pie, and to battle them, you have to keep up with the pace, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you look at the generational, so we've got an aging population. So you've got a lot of people with a lot of knowledge of how they do things. And you've got a lot of youngsters coming into the organization that have their own ideas. So if you don't have that mentality of sharing, then all those old people are going to leave, and with all their knowledge gone. And then you'll be left with this kind of gap of thinking, oh, I don't know how we did this, how are we going to go on, and all that. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. But yeah, there's a lot of benefits that start with just having that mindset of sharing.
Where do you start as an organization to sort of learn during your daily work?
You can have the greatest tools in the world, but if you are not of that, again, going back to the mindset, if you don't have that mindset of, I just need to develop, I am self-aware that, for example, let's take, say, something very simple like presentation training or presentation skills, that there are tools and there are videos and God knows thousands of things to improve your presentation skills. There are master classes and there are apps and there are simulations and all these kind of things. Great. But the one thing I always talk about when it comes to presentation training is that you cannot change anything unless you are aware of it. If I use my only silly example, that's I used to rock when I did presentation, and not that kind of rock, unfortunately. But I used to do this, all the time. Obviously, I'm over-exaggerating for the camera, but I didn't even know I did it. It was weird. And until somebody brave enough gave me some feedback saying, you make me feel sick because all I see is this when I'm presenting. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know I did that. Okay, that's great feedback. Now, what I do with that feedback, that's, again, kind of my own mentality of, right, how do I improve that? Do I stand still? Do I move my hands? Do I, whatever it is. But I could have had 1,000 tools on presenting, but if I didn't know that what I was doing and I wasn't aware of it and I didn't know where I wanted to be, that tool would be useless. It wouldn't help. So I think it really needs to come down to a fundamental idea of, you need to be aware of where you are at the moment, where you want to be. I think I think it's a Japanese called Ikigai, I think it's called, which is like the kind of your purpose. And then you need to understand your values. You can have loads of tools that talk about this is your personality, this, but if you don't know your own values, how do you know where your lines are? How do you know how to communicate effectively? How do you know? Well, actually, no, I rephrase that. You probably do know. It's just, if you don't put your kind of, thinking cap on and go, that is my value and that is why I'm reacting the way I am. And that is why I'm positive about this and negative about that, or whatever it is. Then you can start to use tools to improve that bit of you, or take that bit away from you, or add that, but whatever it is. But you need to understand yourself first. And no tool can do that for you. I mean, yes, you've got things like Insights, Discovery, and DISC, and Myers-Briggs, and all those kind of things. But that will scratch the surface. That starts the question. One of the things I do in my workshops is talk about Yahari's window. When you've got the kind of knowing you know yourself, but nobody else knows it, so you need to disclose that you don't know, but other people do, so you've got to get feedback. And then you've got that unknown area that you don't know it, nobody else knows it. And that's where something like Insights or DISC would go, well, maybe think about this. And then when people say to me, but Insights, DISCs and stuff, it's all just hocus pocus and stuff, and it doesn't really mean anything. I was like, I know, but that's not the point of it. The point of it is to get you asking a question. Are you really like that? I had one person that came up to me and said that their Insights profile was 30% accurate, just terrible. And I was like, that's brilliant, because it means that 70% of that you don't agree with. In other words, you agree with something else. That is insights. So the fact that they have all these different tools and stuff, but you need to understand that Yohara's window and need to understand, kind of getting the feedback from you and getting feedback from these tools. But you need to do something with it, and you need to understand, where do I need to go in order to put all these different things together? And no tool will put that together. No tool will tell you, this time next year, you need to be, chief learning officer, or you need to be a project manager of this, and this is the tools you need. No. A tool will maybe give you a timeline. A tool will give you the things to learn, but they won't give you that ultimate North Star. And that can only start from you.
All right. Great insights, Toby. I feel really enlightened and inspired, actually. Great conversation. And it's been a pleasure to having you here on the show today. And we've been exploring how mindsets, habits, and the knowledge sharing culture can drive change in organizations. We also discussed the difference between growth and a learning mindset, embedding learning into the workflow, and the practical ways to enable knowledge sharing in an organization. And I'm sure the listeners are excited to explore and apply the insights straight into their organizations after listening to this. Toby, before we round off, is there anything else you'd like to add to our listeners out there?
If you want to contact me, I'm on LinkedIn. No, I'm good. I could go on for hours, but yeah.
Well, thank you again, Toby, for sharing your expertise here today. And like Toby said, feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn and learn more about his work in learning and development by checking out the links in the description below. And thank you for listening. And you can tune in our previous episodes anytime on learnster.com or in the Spotify app. Please share your feedback with me or let us know who you'd like to see in the show in the future. Until next time, remember to stay curious and stay hungry for knowledge.